Hi there, I'm Sara Sheehan, and welcome to my podcast, Transformational Thinkers with Sara Sheehan. Today I'm talking with Laura Patterson. Laura is a recognized and trusted authority for enabling companies to take a customer-centric, outcome-based approach to organic growth by enabling them to use analytics, accountability, alignment, and operational excellence to attract, retain, and grow the value of customers. Laura leads VisionEdge Marketing, and she is frequently asked to speak and facilitate workshops for educational institutions, associations, and company meetings. Laura has been recognized for her thought leadership and has won numerous awards, including Ingati's Top 30 Marketing Influencers and Top 200 Thought Leaders, Pigtails Top 100 Influencers, and 20 Women to Watch in Business by the Sales Lead Management Association. Laura, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here today.
I'm really glad to be here, Sara. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Laura, your backstory is important because it is what got you here. But what I would love to focus on is your book, Fast Track Your Business, which I have read and I think is fantastic. Can you speak with me about what your through line is for the book?
So, first of all, thank you for reading my book. I really appreciate that. It's so kind of you.
You're so welcome.
To do so. So, Fast Track Your Business is my fourth book, which I never intended to write. So I want to tell you a little bit about how it ended up becoming a book. It is actually the result of a customer, a longtime customer who I worked with as he went through various companies as a chief growth officer, would bring me into his organization to talk about what we call the circle of traction with his group, his sales, his marketing, his customer service, all of his team. And we would go through a workshop related to the circle of traction. And at one of those meetings, in one of those companies, he said to me, when are you going to put this circle of traction into a book? And I said, never. Because I'd already done 3 books, Sara. And it's a lot, they're labors of love. They take a tremendous amount of energy and time. And he said, I hope you will rethink that. And so I didn't rethink it right away. But then I got an opportunity to be, I was asked to be a radio show host, which I also declined initially. I need to say yes more often, I guess. So this company asked me, had someone who had to bow out of their program for whatever reason. And they came to me and said, would you pick up this show? And I said no to that because I really wasn't an expert. And I don't like to be misrepresenting what I'm capable of doing or trying to lead conversations that I really have no business trying to lead. But I offered to replace the remaining episodes of that show with Ready, Set, Grow. And as long as they would allow the guests on my program to be CEOs here in Austin, because their show tended to focus on the coastal CEOs. And we have amazing CEOs here in Austin. And there were there were 8 episodes left, and they asked me if I would do that. And I picked up the phone and called some of the CEOs I have known for a very long time, and they said yes. After I completed those interviews, another colleague said to me, they were recorded, they were radio shows, said, wow, you've got some great content there. Have you thought about figuring out how you might put some of that into a book? So here I was now, 2 people suggesting that there be something around growth and customer centricity in a book. And so I finally succumbed, and that's how Fast Track got started. And the whole theme of Fast Track is that for companies, especially B2B companies, who want to be successful in the marketplace and grow, in today's what we call customer engagement economy or the age of the customer, whatever you want to call it, you have to be more customer centric because the customer is in the driver's seat. And as a result, you need a different approach to how you're going to be more customer centric. And that is the essence of the circle of traction, which starts with how will you help your customers be more successful Because if you can help them be more successful, you will be more successful. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And could you speak a little bit about the circle of traction?
Sure. In its infancy, it was called the Wheel of Growth, but we changed it to the Circle of Traction many years ago because our customers are trying to get more traction or growth right in the marketplace. And the essence of, is in the world of business is to create a customer. And then once you have that customer, to find ways to keep them and then to grow the value of them. So it's really about creating customer value. So the circle of traction is basically a wheel that it consists of nodes and then has an axle. And in the axle are the things that obviously every company has to have if they want the wheel to turn. And that's an important concept. A lot of people want to turn a wheel and make things happen. But if you don't have the axle, the wheel will not turn. So the 4 things that have to be a part of the axle are your organizational culture and structure, your people and their skills, your processes and systems, and your ability to leverage data and do analytics on that data and derive insights from that data. So that's the axle. And a lot of companies struggle with just those 4 things. So we need to get those 4 things right. Then you can make the wheel turn and get velocity in the wheel. And the place the wheel begins is with understanding your customer. So we always ask people, what do they know about their customers? What is it they don't know that they need to know about their customers? Do you know what your customers value? Do you understand what problem your customers are really trying to solve? Do you understand what the aspirations are of your customers? Do you truly understand what success is for them? And if you don't know the answers to those kinds of questions, it's really important to go get those answers, have those insights before you do anything else. We find a lot of companies like to do fire, fire, fire when it comes to execution. And a key part of execution is ready, aim. And so the axle and the customer insights are the ready. And then you can start working on what the aim is so that eventually you can do the fire, 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 which comes much further in the wheel.
Well, Laura, I give you credit because there aren't many marketing organizations that are looking at business so holistically. And so I really want to commend you for that.
Well, thank you. When I go to places and introduce myself, and I always love those opportunities, and I tell them what VisionEdge Marketing does, people will say, why do you have marketing in your name? You don't do any marketing. And that is true if you think of marketing in the sense of the downstream, the creative execution and the SEO and the email campaigns and websites and social media and video and all of those things, events, whatever they might be, that's very downstream. But companies who want to grow and scale need to be focused on what we call the upstream part of marketing, which is what we do.
Correct.
And the upstream is where, again, the ready aim takes place. And so that's an important distinction. And I think that's, to your point, Sara, why so many companies who hire marketing end up feeling frustrated, because we hear that a lot. Maybe you do too, because they're getting the downstream, but their upstream isn't right yet. And so if you don't have the upstream right, you'll end up, what we call polluting the downstream.
That's right. Or maybe they just need to focus in the upstream.
Maybe. And remember that you had one of your prior guests talk about focus and clarity, right? And that is really important. So one of the challenges a lot of people in business have is that they're inundated with things every day. I don't know if you find that to be true. I know I am.
Most certainly.
And so
most certainly in today's world,
and especially today. And so a lot of folks find themselves engaging in what we call random acts. And the challenge you have with random acts, besides the fact that they cost you time, energy, potentially money, is that they also steal your strategic capacity. They steal your ability to focus and have clarity. And so one of our missions is to help our customers eliminate random acts and replace that with a deliberate, intentional, customer-centric approach so they can actually create measurable outcomes and smarter growth. That's really what we try to help our customers do. And we have a little test. If you're interested, if you think your community would be interested in finding out whether or not they're engaging in random acts, do you think they would be interested?
Sure.
Okay.
Tests are always good.
Well, this is a simple test. Open any plan, your sales plan, your strategic plan, your marketing plan, whatever your plan your company has. And as you look at that plan and you start at the beginning of the plan, which should be your outcomes, which hopefully are written in customer-centric terms. If not, they should.
Yes.
You might want to think about changing that. And as you look at that plan, can you draw a straight line from the outcome all the way through the plan? So objectives, strategy, programs, tactics, activities, all the way through a straight line. Do you have a direct line from top to bottom, right? And anything that's not on that line, we call that an orphan. And then the question becomes, is that orphan a random act, right? Because if it's not tied to an outcome, why would you be doing it?
Yes.
All right? So if it is tied to an outcome, but the outcome isn't in your plan, that's probably something you might want to think about. What outcome is it trying to drive? We may need to revisit our plan. What we find people try to do is they try to reverse engineer, and they try to find a way to stuff those orphans somewhere in the plan back into the line. But usually that's a sign that either the orphan is just something that people have done habitually and no longer really serves a purpose, but it's right. Or it's something that got brought into the picture later in the planning and therefore never really was thoughtfully or given careful thought. It wasn't really intentional. It was just an idea that got put into the plan. But it's, again, right. So that's a really simple test that any company can do.
It's an easy way to see if your plan is connected from beginning to end. That is beautiful. And so, Laura, besides my comment, which I believe to be true, you can tell me if it's not, that one of your differentiating factors is that you're so holistic in your approach. What else differentiates you from other marketing experts?
Well, in the old days, so I'll talk about the old days. I mean, VisionEdge Marketing is 26 years old. So when we first started back in 1999, some of the things that we were doing then were very novel, right? Insights derived from data, focusing on process and operational excellence, creating performance measures that are tied to measurable outcomes, being customer-centric in your growth strategies. These were things that were, for many people, new words. Now those are all kind of buzzwords, right? But I do think the things that differentiate us is this idea of the deliberate, the process side, intentional, the strategic side, the measurability, and the insights. Because we've never found a firm that is a boutique like ours who has the ability to bring that all to bear. You can find them in really large firms like a McKinsey, for example, or a Deloitte or some big name like that, because they have a lot of different lines of business. But to find that in a boutique that's bringing that kind of thinking to the conversation is a little unusual.
That's a wonderful piece of insight to share with our audience. And it's another reason to consider partnering with you for certain, Laura. And so, Laura, what are some of the best sources for insights and data? And how can you apply those findings in your clients' plans?
Okay, this is a great question. And I'll tell you why, Sarah. In today's world, I actually miss the old days in a moment, and I'll tell you what I miss. In today's world, we have so much data that we're drowning in it, right? Way back when I first started in my career, and I know you and I are not that far apart in terms of peers, so you probably can remember the days when you had a box sitting on your desk and it just had a green blinking light, right? And your access to data was far more limited. I think in some ways we made better decisions from that data than we do today. And I'll tell you why. Today, a lot of people want to spend time immersed in the data, trying to figure it out. And the real thing that I would encourage most people to do is start with the questions that you need answered, because that will allow you, back to what you said earlier, to have more focus and clarity instead of just looking at it and getting overwhelmed by everything that you're seeing and trying to figure out what to do with what you're seeing. So, I always say, what are the questions that you need to have answered in order to make a good decision? What decisions do you need to make, right? That will bring additional insight into your customers, additional value to your customers, additional value to your business. What do you know that you need to validate? And what is it you don't know that you need to learn? And start with that. Then you have to think about, well, where would I get that data? So for many companies today, they have invested heavily in technology. They have CRM systems and automation systems and social media platforms and website, and Google Analytics, and on and on and on. So they have a lot of it internally, not to mention their ERP and financial accounting systems and whatever other systems that they might have internal. So a lot of that could be potentially already available to them. And then there's, of course, numerous and unending list of ways to get external data, all the way from third-party resources to what you see through your social media channels, that you're listening from, your listenings data, your sentiment data from external, and then, of course, your own research, doing and conducting your own research with customers and or prospects, whether that research is really methodical and done through some very traditional methodologies, or maybe done through a customer advisory board or conversations with customers at an event or a roundtable or a lunch and learn. So there's lots of different ways to get that other data. Also, if you use the channel, your partners can provide some useful data. So there's lots of data sources, and that's why starting with the question can be a lot more helpful. Otherwise, you'll just be chasing a lot of data and going down a lot of rabbit holes.
Right. And so are there any software platforms specific to marketing that you do recommend?
Well, I think that, there's so many. If you ever have looked at the MarTech landscape, it is massive. So I never like to tell people, massive. I don't really like to tell people what kinds of products or applications to buy, because they need to find what's right for their company. And I think that's the bottom line. Find what's right for your company. You may a product like HubSpot or Salesforce may be great for your company. If you're a really large company, I think that they could be great. But they're complex products. They're expensive, right? So maybe you could use a less expensive automation platform or CRM platform. And there are so many to choose from. We could use up our whole time just listing them off. There's a slew of AI platforms out there, as AI is becoming a very big part of what we all do. Generative AI and other forms of AI. It's been around a very long time. And that's all the way from something simple like a lot of people are using with ChatGPT to products like we use in our company, Centra.ai, which is great for, I think, a SMB size company, to much bigger products, Jasper and others. Again, it just sort of depends. And many, many companies are integrating generative AI and other AI capabilities within their software. So keeping up with all of the updates that are being made, I think, could be challenging for a lot of companies to try and keep up with if they don't have dedicated people to technology or dedicated people to analytics or data science along those lines.
For certain. And so one question I do want to double click on is the application of those data and insights that you glean once you step back and you take a look at the question that you want to answer and the best sources to get data and insights. How do you then apply your learnings?
Okay, so sometimes it's just getting the answer to the question to apply. For example, if you wanted to say, do I have any customers that we're working with that are particularly at risk? Are any of our customers at risk? And you identify what might be some potential behaviors of customers that would signal to your organization that that customer is at risk for whatever reason. And so you can go through your data, right, and look at those behaviors by customer and identify who those customers are. You could also create a customer vulnerability index and get a sense of which ones are at risk. So you can go depending on how sophisticated you want to be. So that would be an example. And once you saw those customers that are at risk, you might want to put a plan together, and you might want to look at those customers and say, which ones of these are ones we just don't want to lose no matter what? And are there some on here that the cost to serve is really high, and maybe if they do go, it's okay, right? But we want to do that in the right way. So how might we do that, right? So that's how you might, as an example. Another example of using the data you might have would be asking yourself, which of these customers would be the best, most likely to buy our next new product, right? So now you might look at,
that's a great question.
We're going to bring a new product to market. And, that old Anson's matrix is really important because it basically says it's the easiest thing to do is to sell what you have to people you're already doing business with. And the next easiest thing to do is to sell whatever is going to be new to the people you're already doing business with, because they already know and trust you. So you're going to bring a new service or a new product to market, and you want to get fast product adoption, so your product adoption rate, and you might say, which ones of our customers would be most likely to do that? And once you identify, again, we're talking about behaviors and indicators, you'd have to really know your customers and then look at that data and say, oh, it looks to us like this group of customers would be the best candidates for maybe being an alpha or a trial user or an early adopter to get some feedback from, right?
Fantastic.
Things like that. And so then that would be another way to use the data. So those are a couple of examples. We can talk about more if you think it would be helpful.
Those are excellent examples, and they really help listeners to understand at a much deeper level how your customer-centric approach applies in everything that you do. And so to pivot from there, I'd love to talk about or hear from you what some new or emerging practices are that are driving results for customer-centric clients that you're using today.
Yeah, so I know we've already talked about AI a little bit, and of course, everyone is embracing AI as fast as they possibly can. I would make a caution there, because if you're not careful, AI can turn into an echo chamber. So you want to be quite careful about how you use AI. And of course, you don't want to put any customer data outside your firewall where it could fall into the hands of competitors or just violate the trust you have with your customers. That said, trying to really understand more about what is your customers' needs and how that fits into their customers' needs, I think is a really important trend, especially in B2B, right? So in B2B, we might be working with a company that makes something that's sold to another B2B company that makes something that's sold to another company that eventually makes itself into the marketplace, right? So there's a movement to really understand all the people next in line in that process, in that exchange, in order to do a better job of anticipating what your first customer is going to need and in what time frame they're going to need it, and what products and services you're going to need to bring to the table to help them be more successful. So that's an interesting thing to be looking at. We have a tendency to sit across the table from a customer and ask them about what they're doing or what they need or what so forth. But really, we should be thinking beyond that, beyond that customer and to their customer or to their customer's customer. I think that's interesting.
That definitely helps you think in terms of impact and the exponential way to grow your business.
I think so too.
Fantastic. You are a very growth-oriented person, and that's very clear by how you approach everything that you do in business and in your pursuit professionally. What big leap are you working on in your business right now?
So we have a application, a software as a service application we have a patent for that really helps people with that test, making sure that they build plans that are completely aligned where there is direct line of sight. And one of the challenges a lot of people, particularly in marketing, face, but it's not the only organization, is being able to come up with the right measures and chain of measures so that when they're having a conversation with the C-suite or the board or whomever, one another, they can really talk in a vocabulary around how we're going to agree on what success measures we're using. So a lot of people are into OKRs or other things, and those are all great, but you still have to have the chain. And so those systems don't set up the data and metrics chain that companies need. And that's one of the challenges and gaps we're working very hard to close. And the second thing is that a lot of people need to engage in a different kind of conversation, particularly in challenging economies, with the finance organization, right? Because they control the purse strings, well, in the sense that they're going to have a lot of influence over that. And so being able to have a conversation about how the money is going to be allocated in a way that makes sense for the company. So everyone always talks about ROI, blah, 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 right? I know we've had these conversations before, and I'm sure you've had them many times. And what we try to tell people is you can't really have that conversation if you're going to allocate your funds in the traditional sub-account way, especially for marketing. So if you're in a traditional sub-account way of allocating your funds, where you have a line item for events and a line item for PR and a line item for a website and a line item for email and a line item for direct mail, you get the idea, right? How will you ever be able to know whether those things made a difference to the bottom line? And the reason, so that's attribution models can help with that. But those are really kind of sort of more in a different way. What would be helpful is to be able to allocate your budget by outcome and say all of these activities that we're doing, that we're spending money on, that we're investing on behalf of the company, are all intended to produce this result. Now, we spent this money. Did we produce this result with that investment, right? So it's looking at your portfolio of investment a little bit differently. It's a little bit more like looking at your way that you invest your own money, right, into however that portfolio is. And so that helps, I think, create a different kind of conversation, business conversation for people who are in marketing, customer service, product, places where it isn't such a direct and obvious link, like sales, for example.
And so your software platform...
Excellence. It's called Excellence, yes.
That is patented. That is out in the marketplace, correct?
Yes, people can subscribe to it. We can help them set it up if they need. It's pretty self-explanatory. And it's statement-based, so that probably gives you a hint on its future direction. It's all designed around statements, and we have a way to help people tee that up through what we call a collaboratory, which is basically collaborating with them to make sure they get their plan initially set up correctly. But yes, that's kind of an important thing. And planning season, is all the time now. In the old days, you had planning, maybe once a year, but now people plan all the time, whether that's quarterly planning or semi-annual planning. It seems like the planning season is never ending.
Yes, I definitely think it has expanded beyond anything that we would have ever imagined years ago. And so in your platform, have you already embedded AI into the approach?
No, but it's on the roadmap. I think that I have been a user of ChatGPT since like the second day it came on the market. I got to be one of the people that helped crash that site. All right. So I've been around generative AI for a pretty long time, and being a data scientist and in the data space and analytics space around AI and machine learning a long time. So I have no problem embracing this technology, but I do think it is still in its early days, and that we will see some things shake out. Right now, we're seeing a tremendous amount of mushrooms popping up, so to speak, or in the space. And I think we need to sort of see how that settles out. I think about the early days of email automation platforms, and you probably can think of, off the top of your head, lots and lots of different platforms. Some of them are still with us. Some of them have long since gone away. Some that were the big players aren't aren't the big players anymore. And I think that will change. And so I want to be careful that we wait and see. I saw that happen with one of our customers. And I saw that happen also when I was the head of marketing, the CMO for an enterprise software company that was one of the first in the space of what we call ETML, extract and movement of data. It was a data platform. And that was built on a particular approach that didn't become the industry standard. And so the companies who waited and came out with it and used what became the industry standard did far better than this particular company, which ended up having to sell early. And so I think it's important. I've seen that happen in other platforms. I've seen that happen. I spent 14 years at Motorola. I've seen things happen in those platforms. So I have a lot of respect for the innovators, the people who are the first and watching the trends and leading the pack and are bringing the new ideas to market. But I also recognize that companies like ours need to hitch our wagon to something that's really stable and market ready.
It's okay to be an early majority member.
Yes, it's perfectly okay.
It is okay, for sure. I definitely understand why you're watching and waiting and being very mindful while doing it.
Thank you.
If you were to build your business over again, what would you do differently?
Oh, wow. Okay. I've made so many mistakes, Sarah. They're far too many to count. I would probably do a number of things differently. I think more importantly is if I were to start today, I would love to be able to go back in time and say I would do something differently. But I for the time, that is what we did. But if I were to start a company today, right, here's something that I will say to people in your community. For those of us who were around in the early days of like Salesforce and HubSpot, and we saw the number of partners they needed to implement their technology and to help those companies succeed. They were a key part of the ecosystem. I believe that there is that opportunity for probably some of the AI platforms. And that would be something cool to explore. I think that could be really fun, is to be one of those kinds of implementation partners. People think they can just do it themselves. I know that many can, especially the larger companies that have, again, the talent. But for the SMBs of the world, and maybe the mid-market people who don't have dedicated talent inside, having a partner, an implementation partner in that space would be really valuable. So if I had a chance to start all over, I probably would do something like that. And I think that could be a lot of fun.
There's definitely space for not only expertise, guidance, wisdom, and sheer experience based on trial and error and actually using a technology in a business setting so that you can understand what you can actually get back. Having that human in the loop really is a critical part of it, to be able to fine-tune the prompt and the process. I think you can really influence the results tremendously with an educated partner.
Oh, absolutely. I'm listening to what people are doing today. Even, we do a lot of process engineering work, operational excellence work, and you can get a lot of value out of using an AI to help you with that. And also a lot of value of finding ways for AI entities to do some of that work. But before you go off and do all that, you really need to have clarity around the process. What is it right now? What is it you want it to be? What is the future state? What is the real value of that going to be, of those changes in the organization? How are you going to educate your people to use a new process, change management? How are you going to educate them? There's so many variables, and a lot of those require humans to be a part of that.
Most certainly. Human intervention is critical.
Yes. So I think that will be really important. It's important even whether you're going through some form of transformation or you're just tweaking. You want to tweak a process. You want to tweak your dashboard. That can be done with people to help you do that. And you might end up being with a better end result because they have already done so many of them in the past, and they kind of know what are going to be the things that you can stub your toe on.
Absolutely. So, Laura, what big goals and aspirations are you currently working on this year?
Okay, I am hoping to do a lot more paid speaking engagements going forward. We, especially around the customer centricity, we have a program called 4 Game Changers for Every Stage of Growth to really start helping people understand what that entails so that they can begin to think about that within their organization. Some simple steps as well as, the bigger picture. And I've been making my way from nonprofit board service to working and supporting a mid-market technology manufacturing company on their board, whether it's
Wonderful.
I would love to do more of that.
Congratulations. That's a wonderful step, leaning into business and influence even more. That's a wonderful step.
Yes, it's actually, we have a board of advisors in our company. I always encourage companies to have advisors, a customer advisory board or a board of advisors.
Yes.
And I have a couple of advisors who have been nudging me. So I'm trying to, I'm taking the nudge.
That's a great thing to do because not only will you be able to add value for their businesses, but you'll come back with insights that you can apply to your own.
And to other customers. Right. I think, yeah, absolutely. Right. You're so right, Sarah.
Excellent. Laura, what are you learning right now? What is intriguing you that you are digging into?
Well, of course, I'm like everybody else, digging into AI, just like everybody else is, and reading all about it and writing about it. I'm in Austin, Texas. You can't hardly go to the gas station or the grocery store without there being a conversation about AI. I've said that before. So that's important. And, I'm a big proponent of trying to figure out how you help your people grow. How do we help our people grow? How do we help our teams grow? It's not just about our customers, and it's about our people as well, and investing in our people. So that is always top of mind for me. And also, candidly, we have to talk about and think about our own growth and being mindful of that. Sometimes we are a little bit like the shoemaker's children and without shoes, while everyone else has got them. So we do have to stop and think about our own future of our company, because if we don't think about that, we won't be here to serve our customers. And our goal is to do that.
I couldn't agree with that more. And so, Laura, as you think about your business and what you're doing right now, how you're currently engaging with clients, is there anything on the horizon that you're planning? Is there anything else that you would like to share?
No, we are so blessed. When I think about the last couple of decades plus, the ups and downs, we've gone through the dot-com bust, 9/11, a recession, COVID, and we're still here. And that's because of our customers. And so everything we do is through the lens of our customers. And this is really important, I guess, message for everyone. I'm not saying that we were asked to do something and we just willy-nilly do it. That's not what really customer centricity is about. But we do try to make sure that what we do will be in the best interest of the communities we serve. And those communities include our customers, our partners, communities we all live in. So I think that's really where we try to keep our head in that game.
Wonderful. Well, Laura, I really appreciate your time. Can you tell me how our listeners can find you?
I would love for them to visit VisionEdgeMarketing.com. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn or email me at laurap@VisionEdgeMarketing.com. And if they have any questions, happy to have a conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Laura.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Here are my top 3 takeaways from today's episode. Start with customer insights. Laura emphasizes that real growth begins with a deep understanding of your customer, what they value, their aspirations, and how you can genuinely help them succeed. Without these insights, execution is just guesswork. Eliminate random acts. She introduces a simple but powerful test. Can you draw a straight line from your strategic outcomes all the way through your activities? Anything not tied directly to an outcome is likely a random act and a drain on resources and focus. Be deliberate with data and technology. With today's data overload, don't get lost in the numbers. Begin with the right questions, then seek out only relevant data and tech solutions that truly fit your company's needs. Tools and platforms are valuable, but only when aligned with clear goals. Laura's thoughtful, holistic approach offers a blueprint for leaders ready to move from noise to clarity and results. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, subscribe and never miss an episode.